Hello, everybody. You're tuned in with Advocata Studio, and as you know, we bring special guests to our studio to discuss about things that matters on policy, on economy, on finance. And we are deeply honored to have Mr. Pradeep Ramakrishnan, Executive Director of the International Financial Services Centers Authority. Pradeep, thank you very much
Thank you for
for
having me.
joining Advocata on your short visit to Colombo. Welcome to Colombo, first of all. Just wanted to understand. I think Sri Lanka has some experience about these financial cities. I mean, some in
Yeah.
the sense we have discussed about Port City, but not many people are aware of what's like the nature of a financial city. And you represent the regulatory authority for the financial city. Could you first give a little bit of color on like what is happening in India with these financial cities,
Yeah.
and what is your role and what's the role of your institution to get the conversation going?
Thanks. Thank you for having me here. I'll just want to go back a little bit in history so that I can actually explain this better. Right. So the study of the Indian economy is largely in two parts: pre-liberalization and post-liberalization. So we had freedom in 1947, just like Sri Lanka had it in a year later. So we have both have a colonial past. So as far as India was concerned, from 1947 to 1991. So the whatever the founding fathers of the independence and the independent India were concerned, so they brought in a concept of a mixed economy, right? Largely, the government would be in control of a lot of things, and rules and regulations were different. It was more of what it was actually called as a license Raj. So licenses were had to be doled out. You have to take out licenses for a lot of things, and the government would determine. So it was more of a controlled, in a way, economy. But at that point in time, whatever it was at that point in time, because of waves of socialism sweeping around the world, because we are always, like we are influenced by a lot of things that happen in the world. So we were following that until 1991. So on 1991, we had some issues with our economy because, though of course India has been a nation which has never defaulted on its dues, we were finding it difficult to get a next tranche of loan from the IMF, and so much so that we also had to ship our gold to actually show them that
That was in
we
Switzerland, right? I read that
yes
story.
yes
You have to airlift the gold, and
gold,
then
and yes, show that. So because our forex reserves had plummeted to almost $3-4 billion at that point in time, and so that was a time when the then government decided that, okay, now we'll have to change the way
that
we do
was the
business.
Narasimha Rao
Narasimha Rao
government.
government. So they decided that, okay, we have to change the way we do business. So we moved away from that type of economy to a concept of LPG, which we call as liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So we changed our rules, regulations. We brought in new regulators like the Securities and Exchange Board of India for securities markets. We changed the way rules are done. Then we moved away from a merit-based regulation to disclosure-based regulation. That was a
Right.
fundamental shift, right? So there was delicensing on the card. So except railways and defense, almost all sectors were sort of completely like sort of delicensed. So a lot of foreign capital started flowing in because India is such a huge population, and you have a lot of potential business. So you had people from around the world coming up and setting up shop. So this was something which started in 1991, and we started feeling the benefits of this in a few years to come. So by the
LPG impact.
yeah impact. So towards like probably the late 90s and the early noughties, so people started becoming a little more wealthier. We started pulling people out of poverty. A lot of things started changing, and then we were like, okay, now we can dream a lot more. Like, so it gives you confidence. So in 2007, an eminent personality by name Mr. Percy Mistry, he was interested with the task of bringing something like Mumbai as an international finance center.
Right.
So he brought out a paper about that, and in a way, people actually say that it's good that it did not take off immediately because of the traffic jams in
Mumbai.
in Mumbai. So anyway, the present Prime Minister of our nation, Mr. Narendra Modi, who was the Chief Minister of Gujarat at that time, he was a visionary, and he continues to be one. And so he was like, why can't we sort of whatever was there in the paper, why can't we sort of adopt it here, right? Because he had gone to Singapore, so he found a lot of Indians there. So now one in every six persons on the planet is an Indian,
Indian.
right? So what was once, which was derisively cost as the called as the Hindu rate of growth, is actually our bane, boon today, right? So because we have people from around the world, I mean Indians who have gone around the world, set up businesses and all that. So then he's found that a lot of people who are doing business in Dubai are Indians, people are doing in business in Singapore are Indians, right? So then the next question as to why are these people not doing business in India, right? What have they gone? Of course, there are people doing business in India, but they are also doing business there, right? Why can't they also do business in India, if not only here? So then he got the idea, he got the answer. The answer was, see, a lot of regulations which are intrinsic to a nation, they are like they are fit for that purpose, right? You bring in because of the mix, investor mix, subscriber mix, regulator mix, also policy mix. So there needs to be a fundamental shift from that line of thought. So, because if you're going to set up an international finance center today, if I ask you, okay, can you please give me the names of three international finance centers? So you will immediately start telling me about a Singapore or a Hong Kong or a London, right? And why do these three names come to your mind immediately? It is because you know that it is easy for you to go and tap money. You can use to go to this place and get money. You can actually go to these places at any point in time. You can come out. So there are certain things which it gives. Essentially, it's about the ease of doing business, cost of compliance, cost of capital. These are the factors which sort of weigh into this. So then he came back and he said that, okay, why we should actually think of something like that. And that is how the idea of the IFSC was born. So the first IFSC in India is the Gujarat International Finance Tech City, or the Gift City, as how it has become very popular. And that is how the concept was born. So if you look at the IFSC, now if I can say a little more, so essentially the IFSC is a place where there is a unified regulator looking after a lot of issues like banking. There's a banking vertical, securities market vertical. We have an insurance vertical. We have a pension vertical. We also have very interesting lines like, we have like India is the largest leaser of planes in the world. So we have an aircraft vertical, aircraft leasing vertical, ship leasing vertical. We even have four foreign universities in this place.
Right.
Right. So it's essentially about creating a place with a lot of substance and sort of metamorphizing into an international finance center so that it can also earn money for, because India is a capital deficient country. It continues, and we also have a lot of promises that we have made to ourselves and to the world, like the sustainable development goals, and also issues like sustainable capital. We have got a net zero target for 2070. So there is so much money we need. Almost 10 trillion is needed only for that, as they say. So towards all this, then this international finance center will actually help us. And at some point in time, we also want to sort of give it back to the world.
Got it.
Yeah.
Pradeep, just to a fundamental question. So this international financial city, the GIFT in Gujarat, does it also fall under like a special economic zone like this Shenzhen,
Yeah.
or like a, is it
So
the same, or is there a difference?
Interestingly, this is the only special economic zone that is dedicated only for financial services.
Right.
Generally, all other special economic zones in the country are dedicated towards manufacturing largely, but this is the only one which is dedicated only for financial services. So it is an SEZ.
Excellent. And coming back, so why you brought the idea of, I mean, the example of Mumbai. So was it because of the vision of Prime Minister Modi then as the chief minister? Was it that actually drove? And is there a trend that, because when you say India, the commercial city like the Mumbai or Delhi probably may have made more sense for an outsider, but I mean, what really made it happen in Gujarat?
So it's see, I would say that it is a combination of a lot of things. See, and it is important that there is a balanced regional development in any nation, right? It should not be sort of concentrated in one place. Like, thankfully, we have the talent, we have the population with talent, we have the enterprise, and we have the entrepreneurial skills, which is also present in all states. So, of course, one should always salute the will of the person who actually takes the first step. Normally, it's always, as they say, it's very tough to make your first million. Everyone is just waiting and watching so that who makes the first step, takes the first step. And once it's successful, a lot of others also. So he was bold enough to take the first step.
Got it. So this seems to be like a bold idea at the beginning, because you have a large population, and since you mentioned, because you had a mixed system, that you had the state control system, and then you were in the transition of slowly your LPG, liberalizing, privatization, and also globalization. So what was the recipe that this took off? Like,
Yeah.
what were the ingredients that you assembled? Because I'm taking it for the Sri Lankan audience to get a parallel, because we had the port city,
Yes, yes.
which the China had to invest on reclaiming the land, and then the regulatory setup is not yet done, and we had to go back and forth on setting up the regulatory framework. So what made it happen, and what was the timeline? If you could give a color on, like, from the initial step to really take off the gift city before coming to your regulatory function, what was like the timeline, and what basically happened, right?
So that's actually a good question. And see, as I said, we after liberalization, we had a lot of. There are some regulators who were existing in India before liberalization. There were newer ones which came after liberalization. Also, we also brought an insolvency law and insolvency regulator. So all those things were working well here. So when the idea germinated in 2012, that was when the foundation stone was laid. It took another 3 or 4 years, and because when the idea and the regulations started being made with the local regulators were the ones who were initially having oversight over this
Right.
city. So then we found that it was felt by the regulators also, because it's difficult to have two different sets of lines of thought. So you have been used to regulating a set of people as a set of and there is also need to have constant engagement, right? So there is need for time, there needs to be dedicated set of people who have to be regulators in a place. So it is important that you need separate regulations. You don't just need carve outs of existing regulations. It will not work. It may work for some time but not continuously, and maybe not all the time. So a need was felt to set up a regulator, because there is also a need for coordination with the government. If you have to bring an incentive, or if you have to bring a rule or regulation, which there needs to be a departure, then there is someone who has to go and sort of speak to the government, tell them as to why there needs to be a change. There needs to be a lobby, for want of a better word, I'm using it. So like proud of you, sort of advocate rather with the taxman, right, on certain things. So you need a regulator who's dedicated for this place, right? So with that, the idea of an international financial services centers authority regulator took shape. So 2019 was when they decided that, okay, we need to bring in an act. So a new act was brought in, and a new regulator was created, who was a unified regulator for this place. So that happened in 2020 October. That was when a unified regulator was created. Now the job of this regulator was to create something for this place. Like for example, today the gift city is the international space of the IFSC. The gift city IFSC is around 300 acres, right? So largely this is the main thing. So there is also a domestic tariff area where these tax exemptions don't apply, but there are other ITES companies which are also doing business there. But now, as it comes to the IFSC, then we have a unified regulator for A, banking; B, securities market; C, insurance; D, pension; and E, aircraft leasing, ship leasing. We also have tech fin and fintech centers. We also have foreign universities, and we also have sandboxes which actually create a lot of things. And we have also created something called global this GCCs and GICs also can sort of set up shop there, so to serve international thing. One thing which we are very particular is that we are not competing with India. So Indian regulators and Indian business will be separate. What we will do business, that business will be separate. So no business can technically take place in India. It has to be outside. And the transactions which happen here happen only in foreign currency. There are some 16 recognized foreign currencies as of now. So business can happen only in that currency. It does not happen in Indian currency. Essentially, that way you also earn foreign currency, and you also make those foreign business houses set up shop very seamlessly.
Got it. Now, just a quick question. Now, when you set up that regulatory, coming to your
Hmm.
forte, so when you set up that regulatory authority, as you said, like, you have to work with the existing regulators, but you have been very clear that this international financial city has to serve for international purposes, and you're not competing with the Indian businesses. So
Yeah.
who championed this? Because sometimes what happens is, in I'm using the Sri Lankan examples, because when you try to have a separate regulatory authority which you are also coordinating with the existing
Hmm.
regulatory authority,
Yeah.
there's always friction and going back and forth. So who championed and getting this together in terms of the regulatory
See, I
HL?
should really be thankful to the local Indian authorities
Right.
because they have been quite. They first of all see the conflict etc. arises when there is no understanding of
Right.
what you are doing and what the other person is doing. When those lines are very clearly demarcated, then I am going to help you in setting it up. So all our regulators, domestic regulators, have actually been instrumental in helping us set up this place.
Right.
So when we said that okay, A, business will be in foreign currency, B, the work will be done only in the IFSC, C, we are doing only non-India business, then all these things are very clear green lights, right? So then when we go to them and say that okay, this is a regulation which is there, then maybe we need a carve out, then they are able to understand and connect better. So like for example, direct listing. So SEBI has got certain rules for direct listing for listed companies. Now these listed companies were also to list in the IFSC. SEBI has said that okay, these things they have to follow, and these other things of yours they will follow. So that law is expected very shortly. So we have been able to do it. Of course that requires meetings, parlaying and all that. Those things have happened and they continue to happen, but we have had a lot of good learnings also, because many times they have also advised us on what exactly we are, so we are actually integrated for all practical purposes. We are also India, right? So we are at another regulator. It's just that our oeuvre extends to this IFSC.
Got it. And now from what I understood and from what I read, so in this gift city, which is the only city as at now, which is the Gujarat International Tech City, which is the international financial city in India, and you are the main regulatory authority, and you have unified the entire regulation under the city. So that's
Yes.
as you said, Securities and Exchange, and the banks and
RBI, yeah,
insurance,
yeah,
everything
yeah.
comes under you. So how do you function? Like, because these are all vast areas in Sri Lanka
Yeah,
and in
yeah, yeah,
India.
yeah.
You have the Central Bank or Reserve Bank of India who regulates the banking sector, and there's a separate regulator. So how do you basically establish to basically
Yeah.
to regulate as a unified regulator? How does it
Yes.
work?
So essentially, the IFSC largely initially and maybe even now in a way is built with people from these regulators.
Yes. Okay.
So now, like for example, I was with Securities and Exchange Board of India for 22 years.
Right.
Right. So I bring with me the securities market experience. Similarly, there are people from the RBI, there are people from IRDA, PFRDA. So these are all people who have worked there. They know what exactly their sector is, what it does. So they come with that experience. But they know once they come here, they have to draft a law which is not what they have done there.
Right.
So, see, one of the most important parts of a person growing is they have to unlearn and relearn. Like, see, it's very easy to learn. I mean, it's tough to learn, but it's tougher to unlearn and
Right.
relearn, right? So that is something which we have done, because now, say, for example, I have drafted rules and regulations for India domestic, right? Listing rules, listing regulations, pre, post, debt, equity. So when I come here, like for example, there is one regulation for debt, there is one regulation for equity, there is one regulation for post issue, and there are two chapters there, one separate chapter for equity, one certain chapters for debt. Now, when I come here, I have to form one integrated regulation for equity, debt, pre and post listing, right? So I have done something, I will take some thread from that. Secondly, I look at how internationally things are drafted, right? What would make a foreign investor to invest in a bond in the IFSC? What would an issuer want out of this place? A, cost of capital, B, cost of compliance, C, easy ingress, egress, looking at A, then ease of doing business, right? So it is important to have regulations that are fit for purpose. So what we did was we have crafted 30 regulations of our own. So we don't have regulations from India domestic that are getting followed here. The job of this regulator itself was to craft regulations which are fit for purpose. So with the advice of a lot of uh, think tanks and policy makers and the domestic regulators, we were able to craft regulations
Right.
which were suited for an international city. Like for example, if you go to Hong Kong, they have a thing, law for bonds, and it very particularly like sort of says that it does not apply to an informed investor, like a professional investor rather. So we have brought in rules and regulations which are similarly like crafted for international investors, international. However, one thing which is very important is that for any international finance city, it should not become a letterpad jurisdiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want people to just come there and just set up something and then for the purpose of tax benefits or whatever, and then no work happens there. You don't should not have a place which is used for booking of income. So we as a regulator are very particular in ensuring that there is substance. So we have mandated that there should be a principal officer, there should be a compliance officer, there should be key managerial personnel. You need to have office space, you need to have infrastructure and all those things there. So if I'm going to say that okay, this bank exists works in Gift City, you will actually go there and find the bank doing it. There will be people there, transactions being happening. If I say that there is a fund, similarly they will be there. People will, so that is how a jurisdiction actually develops, right? Otherwise, then you will not set out for the purpose. For the vision was that, and you have to follow certain steps to achieve that vision.
Right.
So that is what we have tried to do.
Got it. Just a side question, because Sri Lanka, I'm because my brain works like, okay, we tried with
Hmm.
Port City and we are still like, trying to get it done. So how is the financing happens for the regulatory agency? Because
Yeah.
in Sri Lanka, every time when you try to set up a regulatory agency, there's some salary circular that you cannot exceed. So so how does it structure and how the financing takes place? Because from what you said, for you to draft like 30 new
Yeah.
regulation, that means a lot of competent people have to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So how the financing takes place, or is the salary scale, is it par with like the Indian, I mean, how does it work basically?
Yeah. So our salary scale is on par with all the other regulators in India.
Right.
So we have a similar scale. But it is also important that regulators are able to self-finance and become self-sufficient at some point in time.
Right.
So of course, whenever any such regulatory authority started, it starts with a small grant from the government.
Right.
Right. After a point in time, we also set up different rules and regulations to start earning our own money.
Right.
So that is where we are also.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. Now coming back to the tax incentives, because in Sri Lanka, one of the main selling points on these financial cities have been tax incentives. And what is the strategy of GIFT, and how do you see as a regulator on these tax incentives? And explain like how the structure works, what's the policy, how do you evaluate, and details about it.
So for any entity to do business in the gift, so there are two things. One is if you want to raise money out of gift, you need not be present in the IFSC, right? So you can be in any part of the world and raise a bond or an equity issue from the gift city, or you can even take loans from staying in different parts of the world. You need not be present in the IFSC. But if you want to do business in the IFSC, you have to be present in the IFSC. Now, there are different registrations that we grant, either like, for example, as a merchant banker or a bank or a financial institution or a PSP, payment services provider, or maybe as a foreign university. So there are various licenses that the IFSCA grants for you to set up business there. So you also need to follow certain SEC rules so that you can also you become eligible for the tax benefit. The tax benefit presently for income tax is the 10 out of the first 15 years of your existence is your tax benefit. But tax incentives are only sweetness, right? So they cannot be the main dish, right? So towards that, it is important, like again I said, you need to have substance in the work, you need to have substance in people, substance in things like infrastructure. So that is what we are trying to do. So while there are certain other exemptions which the local government also gives for PF and other things, those things are just temporary. So we believe over a period of time, and this is a facet of a lot of international jurisdictions also. If you go to Singapore, if you go to Hong Kong, there are certain incentives which the local authority gives the persons who are coming from other countries to set up business there. But there are certain caveats. So we also have a caveat that you need to set up business and you need to have substance, and business should take happen there. So this is how we function as a regulator. The policy on tax, of course, is something by the government and the income tax department. So that is how it works here.
Got it. So, and also want to understand, when it comes to uh, the tax incentives, is it because how do you what's the regulation on the existing companies in India moving to the financial center? Because what we experienced here was you had the financial city with tax exemption. So the existing companies, which is on the other side of the road, basically slowly moving to the financial city with a new registration, or with, I mean, how it happens in
So
gift.
it's a very good question. So that is why we very clearly mentioned that you will not do any India business in the IFSC. So we are not a competitor to IFSC, or to India.
India.
We are India only. We are also, for all practical purposes, an Indian regulator. We are here to complement what the domestic regulators do. So the jurisdiction of domestic regulators will be domestic India. The jurisdiction of India, of IFSC, will be the IFSC and international jurisdictions. So that way, then it was very clearly demarcated. Secondly, so people just don't, so you can't move a business, so then that completely rules out you moving here. Unless you have international business, then you will not move here at all.
Yeah.
So we have sort of given that those lines are very clear, right? So you don't do India business here, so which means that people will not move here unless they have international business or they have business in the IFSC itself.
Got it. Next, I would like to come on the sustainable
Yeah.
financing, because sometimes the complaint has been, okay, when you set up these international financial cities, it's all about like money laundering to terrorist financing. And, at the same time, you mentioned that India wants to really give back and to move towards the sustainable financing environment, future of governance, environment, bring that. So how have you structured,
Yeah.
and what is the role of the regulator on attracting
Okay.
the right financing schemes?
So I'll just separate my answers in two here. First is I'll talk about the general financing ecosystem, and then I'll talk about sustainable finance. Now, the general financing ecosystem, we have a regulation for banks, we have a regulation for financial institutions. The banks and financial institutions can sort of lend, and that is how money comes. And in case of bonds, in case of other companies, you have bonds, you have equity. You also have short-term instruments like commercial paper and certificates of deposit through which you can raise money. Now, when it comes to all of these things, there is this money is involved, and the color of money is important. So we are an FATF compliant jurisdiction. So the rules which are applicable to India, we have a PMLA Act. All those rules we have AML CFT guidelines, and they have to be complied with, which is why the FATF has actually ranked us high on the radar. So on that front, on KYC, on AML, and there is no let up. So you have to comply with the UBO identification till the last mile identification is required. So you need to ensure that the documents are also kept in the IFSC. So which means that then we are able to probably even be one step ahead of a lot of other jurisdictions which receive money from different parts of the world. So we are absolutely clear about that color of money. There is no let up as far as that is concerned. Now, when it comes to sustainable finance, IFSCA wants the IFSC to be a climate finance hub. That's a very lofty vision, right? So towards that, what is it that we have done? So one thing what we have done is that we are probably the only jurisdiction in the world to mandate banks to lend at least 5% of their total lending for sustainable finance. So that has led to almost 6 to 7 billion of $7 billion worth of money being lent for sustainable finance purposes by almost 30 odd banks which are there in the IFSC. Now, secondly, we also have brought in a concept of sustainable bonds. Now, sustainable bonds can be green bonds, they can be sustainable bonds, they can be sustainably linked bonds or social bonds. So, money has actually been raised in all these categories in the GIFT City by almost 150 odd issues. It's almost $80 billion, 75 billion dollars being raised in bonds. Now, what is it that we have done differently as far as ESG bonds are concerned? One, we have said that we accept all the international taxonomies. Like we have India itself has a listed company taxonomy. Then we have the ESMA taxonomy. We have a taxonomy from ASEAN. We also have a taxonomy from ICMA, International Capital Markets Association. Now, all these things have, you have a choice of adopting anything. For example, if you're an investor from Europe, you would be comfortable with an ESMA taxonomy. So if an issuer sort of comes out with a bond issue where you want to invest, you say that, are you following the ESMA taxonomy? Okay, then I'm comfortable in investing. So that way it has helped the sustainable finance ecosystem to also grow. But again, it is very important that when it comes to green investing, you know that a lot of concepts like greenium, etc., are actually taking a walk. But what is important for green investing is pre-issue and post-issue disclosures and certification, independent certification and assurance. So these things like independent certification, third-party valuation, and all these things are mandatory. Pre-issue disclosures, post-issue disclosures, all these things are separately important for green finance. The last part of the puzzle is the something called ESG funds. Now, the fund industry is quite a big industry in the IFSC. It's possibly one of the most vibrant. So we have got almost 140, 145 odd fund managers which have set up, who have set up almost 220, 230 funds in the IFSC. So we also have said that they can also launch ESG funds. So a few people have launched ESG funds. We have also said that in case you launch an ESG fund, the entire fee is exempt. For the top 10, first 10 funds who are coming with the ESG funds, we are giving them, like, that's a small sweetener that we want to give because we want to encourage ESG investing.
Right.
As I said, India needs a lot of money for ESG related purposes. So this could be a big funnel. The IFSC can be a big funnel for funneling money into India for that.
Got it. And just to pick your brain on some recommendations that we can learn from your experience, I mean, if you were to advise us with your experience with IFSCA and also working at the Securities Commission, how do you recommend to get this off? Because let's be very honest, like one conversation that came out was, okay, for Sri Lanka, because for a financial hub to prosper, there has to be a main market, and that potentially could have been India. And then now India is coming up with your own financial centers. And given the geographical placement that we have that advantage, but at the same time we were quite slow to get the regulatory framework right. I mean, we have reclaimed this land for a long time, and now there's a capex that has incurred, and we are slow to recover. So if you were to advise us on doing three things right, what would you advise, or like what are your thoughts on, rather than a recommendation, like how do you look at the issue?
So that will be, I'm too small a person to advise, but probably you can learn from. So we have been, as a country, we believe in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, which means that Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, the world is a family.
Right.
So if you see, whenever there is anything that happens around the world, any event which is probably worrisome, like an earthquake, India is probably one of the earliest countries to help. It happened even during COVID, when we were the first country to give out vaccines around the world free of cost. So we are always open to show, and because we believe that if there is something which we want to give it to you to learn, you can. So one thing, what probably you can, I mean, you can always look at the IFSC model, because it's fairly successful. We have actually done something. So probably there is a need probably to dealing the domestic and international business. That is something which you can learn. Secondly, when you're setting up an international financial center, it is always important to keep in mind the cost of capital and the cost of compliance. So that is probably the second one that I can tell you. The third one probably which I can say is that there is a need for ease of doing business and easy ingress and egress for as far as investors are concerned. So you have to factor that also into account when you are drafting rules and regulations.
Got it. The other aspect is, because these financial cities require a lot of solid and capable talent, competent people. How do you basically manage that as a regulator on one side, because it requires vast experience, at the same time to the gift, and also would like to understand about the regulatory framework of gift, because like who manages, is there a commission, or is it comes also under the regulator, and who maintains the infrastructure, what's the financing model, and a little bit of detail on that.
Sure. So the gift city comes under a separate authority. It's a corporation, the Gujarat Corporation, separate of the state of Gujarat. So it comes separately. They are responsible for the development of the.
Is it a private company or like the
No,
Gujarat?
it's a government entity. It's a state government entity which is responsible for that. Whereas as far as we are concerned about the business. Right? The entire business rules, regulations, and all these licenses which I talked to you about. All those things are needed as far as as far as the come under our purview. So that is what the IFSCA does.
Right.
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that you attract the right
Yeah,
talent?
yeah. You
Yes.
had a question about. Sorry, I just skipped my mind. So the Gujarat actually as a state has been academically also proficient, and of course we can get people from around the country also coming and working here, which anyway happens. But if you take Gujarat as a state itself, now we have the IIT, we have the IIM, the Indian Institute of Technology, Indian Institute of Management, we have a law university nearby, we also have a maritime university. So all these things are just in and around gift. Another thing which I also told you about was the foreign universities,
Yeah.
right? There are some five foreign universities who are already setting up their courses here. They offer topics on various things like behavioral finance and so many different things. And the UGC, the University Grants Commission of India, does not involve itself in any of the curriculum. So you get to study international curriculum. Even it's open to a lot of other countries. Students also can come, like Sri Lankan students, if they want, they can also come and study at half the price of all these international universities. So that is how we sort of try to also develop talent. But we have also ensured that if you bring in a person, that person also needs to have some qualifications. You don't, if you say that, if I'm say that I'm going to tell you that, okay, you need to have a principal officer, you need to have a compliance officer, then you will say, okay, let me bring in two people and say that, do you want two people? Now here are two people, right? That is not something which I want. No. So what we have done is that we have prescribed what are the minimum requirements for a principal officer, what are the minimum requirements for a compliance officer, a professional qualification or some years of experience, so that the people who come here are also able to bring that value to that particular jurisdiction. So this is what we try to do for talent. We also have talent shows. We also, where some sort of a congregation of people, where we also have, like for example, I'm a company secretary, I'm a member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. So the ICSI, we ask them to organize talent hunts. So same thing we also do for the Chartered Accountants Institute and others. So then you get to know, okay, oh, there is a gift city, there is a job available, then there is someone who is coming from different. Essentially it's all about awareness, creation of awareness, because we have the largest population on the planet, so there is someone for every job. Right?
Correct.
So we have to only create awareness, saying that, okay, there's a job available. So that is also
Does
something
it
which.
mean that, let's say, there are restrictions for a foreigner to do a job
No,
at the
no,
financial
foreigners can
can
come. Yes,
can
yes,
come?
yes, yes,
And
yes.
what's like the visa or the immigration laws for
Same India, all same Indian laws.
same
Yeah,
Indian laws?
yes, yes, yes.
Right. And like, do you get like a resident visa or a particular type of visa?
So today, even foreigners are working in India. The same rules and regulations apply to this place also.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something interesting, that the when the universities are being set up at the financial city,
Yeah.
the Indian, like the University Grants Commission, they need not to evaluate
Yeah.
the curriculum or anything as such. So is there a separate I mean, basically the concept is at the financial city,
Yeah.
the regulation comes under you. So is there a on education regulation or something? Is it
So we
under?
have a foreign universities regulations, but that is more about setting up and what are the minimum requirements that you should have for setting up.
Right.
So it does not concern itself with the curriculum.
Right. And would you like to mention like which universities and like how many students
Yeah,
and
so
how
there
does it
are a
work?
few universities which I can. There is one Deakin University in Australia, Wollongong is there, and there is also. Okay, these are the two things which immediately come to my mind, but there are two, three more. I think there is also one from UK that is also set up.
Got it. And also, I think you touched upon it, but I would like to explore a bit more that, most of the financial cities, as you said, like you really need to bring the real activity rather than, just like post boxes and,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
there's no activity, but you just move the money around. So what else that you have you done to make sure that actually it
Yeah.
happens? And what is the framework that we need to think about it? Because
Yeah.
coming from the same line of thinking, when we thought about the port city, people had concerns, okay, this can be like a hub for money laundering, and especially when there's a risk of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
failing, that of course you drift on a different direction.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there are enough examples how this happens in other parts of the world. So what's the framework that we should think about?
Yeah. So as I told you earlier, we are very particular about the fact that whatever money that comes in should be AML, CFT, guideline compliant.
Right.
So yeah, we may actually have rules and regulations which are a little tougher than most countries, and particularly more so for an international financial center. But we don't want to, sort of backtrack on that. So we are very clear that any money that comes in has to be AML safety compliant. So which means that then the whole money laundering concern, etc., is completely out of the window. So it's in fact stricter in certain elements when compared to even India. So India domestic rather. So that way we ensure that it takes care of. Now coming to your other question on substance and how to ensure substance. So what we do is that we also go for inspections. We go for limited inspections, special
Right.
purpose inspections as a regulator. We go for surprise inspections. So we just go there and see whether the person is there, whether they're actually having the same qualification. Is it the same A or B whom the person declared in the application
Right.
as a KMP? It should not be such that you declare A and then some X is sitting there. So, and how is the business actually happening? So this has actually helped and boosted the need to have people there. So even suppose I'm setting up as an intermediary, I know that the regulator is not going to look over my shoulder, then I can have anyone. But when I'm aware that the regulator is always looking over my shoulder, then they ensure that the people are there. So this surprise inspections of IFSCA and also regular inspections which we keep undertaking of our intermediaries and others has ensured that there is substance in the city. There is of course more also to come. The more people establish, the more. So over a period of time, then you will have, hey, I was working in this fund in IFSC. Now this I moved to this bank in IFSC. Like people move in different international finance centers. So that is something also which is happening and will happen. So there is exchange of talent that becomes a pot boiler of, it's a melange of different sets of individuals with talent moving inside the international finance center.
Now this leads to the next question as a regulator, because as you
Yeah.
said, you have to make the business environment better, but at the same time you have to bring the regulation that
Yes,
people don't sidetrack. So as a regulator, or, I mean, as the executive director, how do you, again, what's the framework? Because you cannot, I mean, people come for less regulation to, so then they can do the business easily, but at the same time, as you said, like, you have to keep the show, I mean, you to look above the shoulder and see, no, this is how you things get done. So what is the strategy on striking a balance between the two?
See, the key is ease of doing business is that the operations should be easy to do, right? But it does not mean that you don't have anyone, right? You don't have, you use it as a letterbox. You work from different parts of the world. So what we have done is a clear demarcation. We are not interfering in the operations as long as they are compliant with the rules and regulations that we have already brought. So a lot of companies are comfortable with it, right? So you have a set of regulations which are different from domestic regulations, and they are fit for purpose. They have been crafted for this particular jurisdiction. So you have that regular filings and other things. People are fine with doing that. Now, when it comes to talent, now what happens, it's important for a regulator to set that culture of compliance. So from day one, if I am told that this is the only way the business takes place in the IFSC, then you will never have another reference point. There was a point in time when I could set up an office without anyone. That was never a reference point, right? The reference point has always been that from day one you need people. So then people know from day one that there is no other alternative. This is the only way. So this is how we ensure, and this has been quite successful, and this is how it will be.
Great. Also want to understand about the arbitration and the litigation. I mean, what's the judicial process? Because in Sri Lanka, when we had the port city, we thought, I mean, it's a Singaporean system that we are going to bring in. How does it happen at GIFT? And what's the take on as a regulator?
Yeah. So see, we have the Arbitration and Conciliation Act in domestic India. So presently, we are also in the process of evolving an arbitration mechanism, a framework of our own. So hopefully that should happen soon. There are a few cases where arbitration, etc., which would have happened, presently happen in certain jurisdictions like Singapore, but we are shortly going to take care of it by having our own arbitration center in the IFSC.
Got it. And what are the areas that you see for an example, India Sri Lanka cooperation on the financial cities? Are there, except for GIFT, are there any financial cities coming up in India, in other states? And if so, how do you see the collaboration with Sri Lanka?
So two things. So when it comes to, because as if you look at our logo itself, is International Financial Services Centers Authority. So there can be other centers which can also come up in different parts of the country, but that is the governmental policy. That will be a call that will be taken by the respective state government and the central government. So amongst them, they can come out with that, of course, but we will be the regulator for that also. But when it comes to what can Sri Lanka learn with their cooperation, and the opportunities for a Lankan businessman or a Lankan bank. So as we speak on Monday, we are going to have the listing of a Sri Lankan bank on the National Stock Exchange IX, right, International Stock Exchange. So which means that there is a scope for because like India, you also need capital, you also need funds, right? So you can have businesses which can tap the gift city for funds, you can have businesses which can tap the banking industry in the IFSC for funds, right? And if you have companies which want to go abroad, go international, right? So your merchant bankers can actually bring companies there to to launch their issues, so that you can have international people to come here to invest in these companies. So that is something which you can actually do. And there is also a huge business potential, right? See, because you have companies here, you have families here, you want to invest internationally, they can use the IFSC for that. So this way the cooperation between the two nations can do it. And over a period you can also learn from the IFSC as to what we have done, so that you can also implement it if you
Got
want
it.
to.
Also, on a regulator's point of view, especially on these international financial cities, all the big players are going to set up, and there is a risk of like the regulatory capture by the big players
Mm.
in certain instances. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
what mechanisms that you have or
yeah.
on to avoid any regulatory capture? What's the trust factors that you can bring in that this won't happen at gift
Yeah,
and under
look,
your regulatory?
excellent question. Uh, we are the first regulator in India to have a regulation for making regulations,
Okay.
right? So it was also brought in by the performance review committee. See, we believe in being transparent. So, and it is a very important concern that you express, that some people are not sort of guiding or bulldozing their way into making rules and regulations. So it does not happen on the IFSCA. So what the IFSCA does is, whenever we discuss, whenever we want to come with a policy, the first thing we do is that we put out a consultation paper. The consultation paper, sometimes in some cases we put out the consultation paper two times, right? So the first time there will be interested parties who will give their comments. Then you may have market infrastructure institutions that will give comments, financial investors around the world who will give comments. Then we'll draft something, and then the final law is again placed before the world, the world at large, on our website for comments. And then we again take into account their comments, and the final law is made. So this way we ensure that the comments of all the concerned parties are actually taken into account, and it is transparent. So you know that, okay, before the comments the law was looking like this, after the comment the law is looking like this, and it's because of the fact that A or B or C have given comments. In fact, to go a step further, even our agenda items on the board, after the meeting is over, that is also posted on the website,
Right.
including the comments are also posted on the website. So you know that, in a way, that this, I mean, you can't get more transparent than that. And that ensures that this so-called concerns about regulatory capture and other things don't happen.
Got it. I think we are coming to the final stage of the conversation. Also wanted to understand on a leadership role, uh, someone who has worked for 22 years, like what lessons that you would give for potential individuals who look forward to take
Yeah.
up these type of assignments, because
Mm.
it's not an easy role.
Yeah.
You have targets on one side, you have a lot of conflicts coming from the other side. Like what sort of skill sets that those people should think about, and like how to avoid getting into trouble, what lessons that you could bring as experience, maybe some case studies that you went through, if it's allowed to share publicly,
Yeah.
some stories.
See, so if an individual aspires to be a regulator, if they want to, the first thing which I would always say for a regulator is that you have to be optimistic. You have to create rules and regulations for all weather situations, right? They cannot act differently when the market goes up, for example, in case of a stock market, and they cannot act differently when it goes down. So it's important to have an all weather. So for that, it is important for you to follow the process of learn, unlearn, and relearn. The most difficult thing in this three things which I told is the second part, unlearning what you have learned earlier, because it is important for you to say that, okay, ultimately the winner should be the regulatory framework, right? What has come, it's not about my ego or what I have done. It has to stay, it has to listen to what I have done. It has to say the same. So it should not be such that law has to be dynamic. law also has to take into account different situations. So it also needs to contain the necessary flexibility. It should not be rigid. Like so because the inflexibility in law always puts people off. And then law also has to be in such a way, policy making should be in such a way which attracts the issuer, the investor, and the intermediary also. So there are three different people whom you have to satisfy. So sometimes you will not be able to satisfy everyone, but at least majority of what they are able you are able to do, ultimately keeping in mind the IFSC and the vision for which the IFSC was created. Like for example, here the IFSC was created with largely the major three things. One thing was to onshore the offshore, like whatever has gone out, you bring in. The second one was to become a hub for global capital flows. It can be equity or bond or loans and banks and whatnot. The third one is to be a hub for innovation, right? So ultimately, I have to ensure that these three things which are there in the vision are taken care of when I craft the rules and regulations or policy making. So when I don't lose sight of that, then I will ensure that I will do this unlearning and relearning when I do the policy making. So this is something which I probably can tell the new people, keep reading. I mean, that is something which I always tell people, unless you never let that go, because the world changes so fast and it is changing as we speak, right? So it's important to be abreast so that you don't get left behind.
As a regulator and as GIF, like what is your like success matrix? Like how do you evaluate whether this is moving in the right direction, or are there any benchmarks,
Yeah.
or are you comparing with like other financial cities? And also I would in the final few minutes I would like you to touch upon like also the geopolitical dimension into it, because now India has become like the third largest economy, exceeding Japan. So you are coming into the big players league, and you are basically the regionally, you take that leadership role on the
Yeah,
other
yeah,
side.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so how do you explain on these context?
So see, one thing which, as I told you, as India as a policy has, is that we as a nation have always been open to learning and giving, right? And we automatically, not just by virtue of the size in probably the South Asia, it also by virtue of the fact that we also want to, sort of bring something to the table, add value. So this is how, as a nation, we have been. Now, when it comes to regulations, rule making, and also the fact that our position in the world economy and other things are concerned, now that is a number. So how do you sort of evaluate yourself, right? One is, of course, there is a matrix which are published by certain third parties, where okay, I'm seeing, okay, where was gift last time, where is gift today, right? Okay, that certainly is there. I mean, I would not lie that we would obviously want to see a ranking go up. So that is always there. But there are certain factors which go into making those metrics. So you discount those factors and still you find that you've gone up. Yeah, that is a regulatory impact assessment for me. Okay, I'm doing something well. But the other larger thing will be my own progress report. I have an annual report which I publish every year. So the previous annual report, I'm going to look at, okay, there are how many banks, what is the amount of business that I have done, how many people are employed. So I go to the next annual report and I'm seeing the same things, right? So I have certain parameters on which I will evaluate myself, because deep inside you, you cannot lie to your conscience, right? So my biggest evaluation will, of course, while there will be third party assessments, my biggest evaluations will be, okay, where I was yesterday, where I am today, and where I'll be tomorrow. So that for that I have my own statistics which are, I mean, I cannot lie to myself. So those statistics are collected by IFSCA. They're published in a quarterly bulletin also. Every quarter we publish on the bulletin. We also have an annual report. So in the annual report, these statistics give me the direction as to where I have to go and whether I have been doing something right.
Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you very much for joining us. Any final thoughts which I did not ask, but you think that it should be, worthy to share with us? Anything that I missed out, or any final thoughts from your end?
No, no, excellent. I think you had a very wide coverage. I think you have asked us a lot about what we have done and what we propose to do and where we are. And I particularly liked a lot of questions, particularly on regulatory impact assessment, a lot of things, and the regulatory capture thing. They're excellently crafted. But what I would like to leave the audience with is the fact that we are always open to learning. We are also open to learning. and there is a tremendous business opportunity in the IFSC which you can tap. So please, there's a lot of information is available on our website, and it is also structured under different verticals. So I'd request everyone to read. They're all free. They're available for everyone to read. So I would be happy if people are able to do it. Please approach us at any point in time. My email ID, yeah, all those things are available on the website. And please reach out to you. We'll always help out the way we can.
Thank you very much, Pradeep, for
Thank you.
joining us, and all the very best on your short visit to Sri Lanka. I'm sure there'll be like the banks who are opening up at GIFT. I'm sure there'll be more Sri Lankan companies who will
Yes.
explore and join the financial city in Gujarat. And
Thank
all the
you.
very best for all your future endeavors. And thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you
And
so
thank you
much.
very much for watching us. And make sure that you subscribe. And also, we are available in Sinhala as Advocata Plus and as Advocata Kural in Tamil. And you can, I mean, we are available on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok. You name any social media platform, you should be able to find us on social media. So thank you very much. We'll see you with another episode under Advocata Studio. Take care.